Hello, my name is Ross Victory, and this is a repost of the session that I held at medium.com called Writing Through the Storm. So a few weeks ago, I spoke as a session speaker, and I thought that the feedback was just really positive, and this was something that I wanted to make sure that people get access to on my website, on my YouTube. And so here it is. The session was called Riding Through the Storm, Exploring Identity, Health, and Creativity. And as you can see here, there's this little boy, and the storm is swirling around him. Of course, the storm is a placeholder and a metaphor for challenges in our life and hardship that occurs. So, the goal is to tell you a little bit about my background while also dropping some seeds of inspiration to get you thinking about how this lecture or this mini lesson works. And so we can just move right on to the um, core of the course. And so the frame of this mini lecture, mini course is around this quote. So when I saw this quote from Mehmed Marak Ildan, I was really taken back. So he says, if the storm hits you 50 times, you may not be destroyed, but if you do not heal the wounds of those 50 hits, you will be knocked down the 51st hit. So when I saw this quote, a few things popped up. So the first thing was, okay, there's going to be a lot of storms in our life. And so I'm 38 and I really love speaking to our golden aged people. And this is super true, right? You don't know what's coming, things are coming. But also, there's an end to the storm. That it's on a cycle, so it doesn't last forever. Maybe there's a lot of them, but they're start and go. And so it makes me think about how do we develop either the resilience or the skills to be able to embrace the storm, know that the storm doesn't last forever, but also like stay hopeful and not be immobilized. And I want to start with some words that we hear in our lives. And so, as I present these words, I want you to think about words that have been branded onto your mind that you will never forget. And these could be words from people, these can be words from society, these can be words maybe you've said to yourself. So, some words that I've heard or phrases I've heard are, we're getting a divorce. Something else I've heard is your brother has brain cancer. Have you seen your father? He doesn't look good. I'm bisexual. I was laid off. And so these sentences and these words get branded onto our mind and they start shaping how we feel about ourselves. And these could be maybe the entry point of a storm. Um, you know, after I presented on Medium, people reached out to me expressing some of the words that had been branded on their mind. And the topics range from miscarriage, of course, to cancer, to being misgendered by society. And so I want to start with this kind of frame. So as we move through the presentation, this will kind of shape how you can write about it. Because when we say something like we're getting a divorce, that phrase didn't just pop out of nowhere. There was a story that led to that statement. When I say that I'm bisexual, that's not just something that fell out of the air. There is a story and many events and a lot of life that got to that statement. So these are some of the things I want you to think about as we go forward. And so you may be asking yourself, who am I? Why am I talking about this? And so it's really important for me to take a heart-centered approach to this topic. And as you see these pictures, think about some pictures that you would pull that represent kind of who you are and key moments in your life. And so this is me at least between 5 or 7 years old. I was a kid who loved writing stories. Um, I loved singing and writing songs. Actually, the first talent show that I ever sang at, I sang a Little Mermaid song, which was called Harmony. So I was just really one of those kind of sensitive, happy kids. And this outfit in particular, I think weirdly represents the vibe of the time. And so just a heads up, there will be photo shoot pictures throughout this presentation. That's just what it is. These were my parents. So my parents were married in about, I think, 1980, 1981. They met in a courthouse. My mom was an assistant. My dad was a probation officer. And yeah, they got married, had me and my sister, and also there was two older brothers from a previous marriage. My parents were very religious, so I went through K to 12th private Christian school. We were always at church Wednesday, Sunday morning, Sunday school service, maybe Sunday night, right? So this was a very religious environment. And so as I go through the story, my personality just in general, I feel like I'm an artist in my heart, right? So a lot of what fuels me or makes me feel alive is rebelling or defying and asking questions and pushing back on the status quo. So keep that in mind, but these are my beautiful parents. I want to hone in on my dad because my dad was definitely, in hindsight, one of my biggest influences and best friend. He opened me up to traveling the world. Um, I've been to about 28 countries for him planting that seed. We were nerds together. We would collect library cards and hang out at the library and also watch airplanes take off and land as I was a little kid, just to imagine or wonder where the people in the plane were coming from or where they were going to. And so we really influenced each other. This picture over here, I went skydiving, I think, for my 23rd birthday, and he later jumped for his 66th birthday. So I think in many ways, my dad was what many people would call uh, an honorable man, a great father from um, his commitment to the family, of course, not perfect, but also just the way that he tried to show up for me. This is me as a preteen. I want to say at least between 10 and 12 years old. This picture is significant because this is where the little tinglies of the bisexuality start. And so, how I like to describe it is one day I went to sleep, and the next day it was almost like a new awareness of, okay, so why am I checking out boys on the play yard? And it happened literally overnight. And the way that I remember that is because there was a gay student at the school who people kind of didn't understand or who laughed at him and made fun of him. And then all of a sudden, I went to sleep, woke up, and I was like, uh-oh, this must be what it feels like to be a gay person. But why do I have this other thing over here? And so, of course, when you're 12, 10, right, you're in this religious environment, you don't know what the hell that is. And I'm just going to keep it to myself. Wear my shades, pose for the camera, and we're going to keep it moving. This is me as a teenager. So they were getting to 15 to 17. So by this point, I'm using the word and label bisexual to a handful of people. I'm also expressing my um, duality through dyeing my hair, wearing all black and spiky belts and spiky necklaces and trying to, the whole flowers and the black, just trying to work myself out with how I wanted to present myself and show up. And I think this is important just to show these pictures because when you're telling your story or when you're sharing your storm, it's important that people realize that we're all human, right? So we all go through childhood and teens, and there's moments and there's pictures that kind of tell more about the story. And this one with that orange hair is definitely um, saying something. Oh, and the acne written face, of course. And then here's me at graduation and in college. So the college years related to being bisexual and trying to understand what was happening next in my life. That was not easy. College was a time where I found out, hey, it's not really cool to be like a bi man. That's something you kind of want to keep to yourself. And that's unfortunate because, in college, I saw a therapist and still trying to get to the core of what I was feeling. And she affirmed me, thank God. And she was like, you sound like you're bisexual from what you're saying. And so that just gave me a lot of joy. It made me want to tell people, right? But that's not what life had in store for me. And so this was the beginning, despite that smile, of how I began to learn being bi is something you maybe want to keep to yourself, or since you do like multiple types of people, maybe you just don't need to say anything. And so maybe it's better for everyone that you don't say anything. And then my parents broke up. So after 31 years, this is where we're getting the divorce. This is that statement. This is the picture. And that was difficult, right? Because sometimes we can't think of our parents as people just in general, but we can't imagine them not being a unit. And so my dad eventually lived between Los Angeles and China, or the Bay Area in China. And then also my mom moved. And so just like that, the victories were over. The childhood home was packed up, and everyone was really confused because we didn't know what happened for them to become divorced. And very soon after that, I decided to go to South Korea and teach. Everyone seemed very crazy to me. They felt off. I couldn't understand what was happening. So I am learning to be situationally by. My parents are divorcing. I'm graduated. I don't have a job. I'm trying, like, all this in between all these feelings, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna get on an airplane and get the hell out of here and go to South Korea. And maybe before I move on, this is where I heard the next statement is, Ross, Jason, or your brother has brain cancer. Um, and this came out of nowhere. This was very shocking to hear while living abroad and dealing with a new culture and the anxieties of working. Um, and that's where, life just added another storm of what does that mean? This is one of the last pictures my dad and I took. So the statement that attached to this picture was, Ross, have you seen your father? So this was January of 2017. And by June 2017, um, my dad was, he was gone. And so we think about statements that we hear that have been branded in our memory. We think about the picture and what was going on behind the scenes. And I want to pause right here just to talk a little bit about it. But those are the stories and the moments that shape us, right? Because when my dad passed away, all of a sudden I uncovered another version of him, right? So I knew a version of him, but of course he's a full person. And I discovered he was being abused, financially abused. He had gotten remarried to someone from China that he had met. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, okay, I don't know if I understand who my dad is. This man is way more complicated than I thought. And I just want to do right by him, right? Because as I told you, my dad was the foundation of my life. And I just felt that there was no other way to continue but to honor him in that way. And so this event made me a believer in therapy. This made me a believer in journaling and writing and self-care because many ways of this situation I didn't think that I could survive this because it is a identity shift, right? There's a hole that happens that actually I could feel for a period of time of just a loss. This is my dad, I was his son. And so, although I am still his son and I understand that now, it just feels like emptiness. And I really wanted to feel that. And that's what kind of led me into this whole era or identity as an author. In my mind at the time in 2019, I said, okay, so I have this loss. How do I feel this loss? My mom reminded me, as I showed you that picture of me at 5 to 7 years old, Ross, you always used to love writing stories and telling stories. You should tell your story. You have something to say. And so all of a sudden, the whole of burying my dad and losing him was filled with this person of a writer and an author. And I used this opportunity to really memorialize some of our moments by calling this book Views from the Cockpit and taking myself back to that memory of watching airplanes land and take off at LAX, right? To really walk through how did I get to the statement of Ross, have you seen your father? To really walk through the life of how did I get to the statement of Ross, Jason has brain cancer, right? So this was my proof to myself of all the life that had occurred and literally me releasing it into the world through the book form. And so this book started as journal entries, but ultimately took the shape of a narrative over the course of about 2 years. And then I just kept writing and writing and writing and writing some more once I was able to access a system or something that worked for me. And part of that included, you know what? I want to talk about what it means to be bi on my terms. I had never gotten that opportunity, and I didn't even realize that there are so many other bi people who are having similar experiences. And so I told my story, and I thought about, the world, I'm just someone's son, right? I'm just someone's brother. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and the world really has what it means to be bi mixed up. So what type of stories do I want to tell? What resources, motivations, and skills do I have to kind of like show the world who these little black boys and men are? And so I went on the journey of creative nonfiction and memoir into telling fictional stories and imagining the type of representation that I seek, as well as the themes that I know a lot about, which are family, identity, self discovery, travel, right? So all of these things were me just honoring that need to feel that whole. And being an author and writer and creator was a way for me to do that. And so I want to tell you, you've been thinking about the words that stick in your mind, you've been thinking about the associated picture. When you write and share, you become the way shower for someone else navigating a similar storm. So you see this lighthouse is pointed out in a specific direction. When you share, this is you turning on your light to that person who's navigating that storm of, what do I do with this divorce? What do I do with this family member that has cancer? What do I do with this sense of loss that I feel coming out as bi and not being able to control the narrative and what people know and understand about me? What do I do? And so when you share, you shine that light to someone else who's navigating that same journey. And I want to tell you that they're not the only people who will see that light shining, right? A lot of different people are out in the ocean on their storms. They're just trying to make it, right? I don't know what better way to say it. People are just trying to make it. And so when you shine that light, it's literally a sense of hope. It's a sense of maybe possibility or a way, right, to be a light. And it's also a reminder that the storm that we talked about earlier, that all the clouds and the darkness and all of that, eventually it will clear. And so when we talk about shining a light and medium.com, I think medium.com has been pivotal in connecting directly with people who share similar journeys. And so, as I mentioned, I became a believer in therapy. So I wrote about why Black men should be in therapy. That's something that my dad, he was a religious guy, right? Talking to people about your problems. He was also a military guy. So, I mean, all of that was not something that I grew up with. And so I told my story, and a lot of men resonated with that. Even when I published the first book, I found a whole community of men who were, I don't want to say struggling, but men and their fathers, that is a topic of being seen as a capable man. And then when you add the component of being bi or not a heterosexual person on top of being a man in the eyes of your father, then we start talking about things like, oops, I waited until my dad died to come out as bisexual. And then a lot of men, oh my God, I can imagine broaching this topic with my dad. Then we talk about the experiences that bi men face and the biphobia and their erasure and the stereotypes and all these things. And so this is using that metaphor. This is me trying to process my own kind of life and make it out of this storm by sharing, and at the same time sharing and being met with, hey, me too. You're not the only one out here on the sea, although that it feels like it, right? It often feels like it, that we're the only one experiencing things. And I think when we write and share, it's so powerful to know that no, you're not the only one. And sometimes the experience, our experience of our storm, isn't maybe about us or necessarily for us. Maybe there's a broader implication and more people are impacted by what we're going through. And so that brings me to this quote. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is for certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same. Now, if that ain't the truth, right? And this man is amazing. Haruki Murakami. He's an author and musician. I feel a lot of kindred spirits with him as far as writing and creating music. But this is the damn truth. This is the truth. When you come out of the storm, you will not be the same. Physical storms, if you live in like hurricane or tsunami land or anywhere, but also the emotional and the mental storms. And so the little boy on the island who's riding through the storm, all of a sudden, these gifts, right? When we reframe all of these things that are happening, we can see that maybe these are gifts and maybe these are lessons that are learned, how to move forward, what to do, what not to do. They're memories of our loved ones. They are conversations and a reminder that we have a voice and a choice. We can choose what this means. We can choose what we say and what happens next. And although it sounds cliche to say, sink or swim, we have a say in what we do next. And an important gift is how to survive. After each storm, as we talked about 50 storms, each storm teaches us something new about how to survive, how to recalibrate, how to get ready for the next one. What do we need? What don't we need? How to move forward. And so I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of actually how to write through the storm. And so there's a few activities, and I do have a worksheet to get your creative juices flowing. But I want to hone in on these three right here. So the words that you'll never forget and the associated picture. I think when you tie a picture to the time period and when the statement occurred, I think that that is a very holistic way to explore and write through the storm. But who said the words? What were the circumstances? So we're talking about divorce or miscarriage or cancer or, unfortunate situations like abuse. We don't have to necessarily outline everything that happened around the divorce, around the cancer, around um, the experience or the thoughts that resulted in a certain identity. What we want to do is explore how those words impacted us, not necessarily the physical details. The next activity that I would encourage you to explore is message in a bottle. And so the message in a bottle, I'll talk a little bit more about this one, is a love note or thank you note to your younger self from the future. Also, reauthoring the storm. How do we take all the heaviness and the negativity of the storm and flip it into an empowered, elevated perspective? And so for those people who have interest in fiction, this is a interesting, dare I say, fun way to fictionalize or make it so you win. Make it so you get the money. You win, you come out as the victor, you come out with everything making sense. A few more activities is a declaration, of course, of what it means to be me, what it means to be where I'm from. And then also, I want to encourage you to search for calls for submissions to tell your story. So you may just be like, okay, so first off, your story is for you. Okay. You don't have to share any of the activities that you do. These can be journal exercises and self-discovery exercises. But if you do choose to share, I would encourage you to search for calls for submissions to tell your story in a safe context. So, for example, if you want to come out as an LGBTQ person, search for calls for submissions or forums that celebrate and acknowledge coming out stories. So I don't want to get into if coming out is the proper term or not. I have my own thing, but you get what I mean. If you want to talk about father-son relationships, impact of mothers and daughters, absentee parents, any kind of topic, any storm that you want to explore, there's usually a call for submissions to give you that safe context to tell your story. So it doesn't feel like you're just posting it and sharing it with the general public. And of course, medium.com, since this is a recap from Medium Day Conference 2024, is a great place to find your audience. And so when we think about words that you'll never forget, right? I shared some of my own, and I would love you to be in contact with me to share some of the words that you'll never forget. But I want you to think about what life was occurring externally and internally to get to those words, to get to that picture. So I showed you a picture of my parents, right? What was all the stuff happening in the background and inside to get to the words, we're getting a divorce? Did you see the signs? Were there any signs? Um, what was the home relationship like? So this is talking about all the layers and the steps to get to that statement. What happened after you heard those words, right? And so a lot of this isn't always going to be nice, right? It's can be a little dark and messy. So when I heard the words, we're getting divorced, we were all sitting in a circle as a family and everyone just began crying. And my dad hugged me and said, Ross, please forgive me. I was frozen. I didn't know what to do. So again, the details aren't the goal. It's how those words impacted you. That's the goal. We don't want to relive your trauma. We don't want to traumatize the audience if you decide to share. The focus is on the impact. When you hear those words, how did you feel? So that's a good question to focus on the impact. And then connecting the dots, right? Do you remember those little kid games where you would connect the dots and it would be a horse or a pony or whatever, right? So every dot maybe isn't apparent, but as you're drawing the line, all of a sudden you get to see the broader picture of who you are and what you came to do and what story you came to tell and what light you came to shine. And message in a bottle, I think this would be a fun kind of activity or frame to do. So this is a love note, thank you note, encouragement from who you are today to your younger self. So I see that little boy, Ross, 5 to 7, in his sweater, in his necktie. He's smiling and he's happy. What would I tell him today, knowing what I know now of all of the statements and all of the pictures that are going to come in his life? What would I put in this bottle and put into the past for him to find on another timeline or dimension or whatever, if we want to go sci-fi? So, Ross, I'll just give you some examples. What skills and experiences and people will help you navigate the storms? Because I know that now on the other side of it. Ross, how did you wake up each day and how did you keep going? So, as you worked through divorce, your dad's death, your brother's death, revealing yourself as bisexual, being laid off, and all of the little micro experiences in there, how did you continue to wake up each day? What kept you going? And so this is really to get into the attitudes and the identity. And the truth is, it was hard to keep going. And a lot of days I didn't feel like I would do it. A lot of the days it felt like autopilot, right? So there's a lot of complexity. Number three, I think, is a great one. What should I know about who you are and who you're becoming? So this is the older self, right? Little Ross, what should I know about who you are and who you're becoming? So little Ross can say, you should know that I am someone who just wants to be happy. I just want to have fun. I just want people to treat me with respect. I just want to be respected and acknowledged for my contributions. And I'm someone who's going to have to learn to prioritize and value myself because ain't nobody going to do it. So think about some of these questions as you work through your activity. And another great one is reauthoring the storm. So this is for the people who have that fictional kind of flair about them. And I just want to say quickly, I know sometimes when bad, horrible things happen in our life, we feel like something has been sent to destroy us. God doesn't love us. This is happening because there is no God. I'm not worth. What did I do to deserve all of this? All of those types of thoughts, right? And so when we reauthor the storm, we reframe the meaning of why it's happening. So for the first three, I underline my own personal examples to get your kind of thoughts going. So, how has losing my father, so you could replace this with your situation, how has losing my father shaped me into the person I aspire to be today? So, the actual question to that is that was the launch point. That was the catalyst for me being on a Medium Writers Conference speaker session. That was the catalyst for me becoming a published author. That was the catalyst for me engaging in online conversations about bisexuality. That was the catalyst of me advocating for myself at work. So, number two, what lessons did revealing myself as bisexual teach me about others, myself and others? Again, revealing myself as the revealing part, right? Because I told you that the feelings and all of that was there from very young age, but the revealing taught me that I was strong enough, that I believed in myself and my truth, and that came before other people. This taught me that actually other people don't really care on the degree that you think that they do. This taught me that I am capable to finance my life and move forward. This taught me that sometimes there are people who care about you and who are allies and won't get a different idea in their head based on what you're saying. This, it's just on and on. So this is kind of like excavating, pulling out those attitudes, those beliefs, and those ideas. Number three, can I now find gratitude for my parents' divorce, even though it was painful at the time? And some of these questions can be hard, right? Can I find gratitude for my parents' divorce? Well, if they wouldn't have gotten divorced, then everything that followed that wouldn't be what it is. And so if I'm grateful for today, I'm grateful for everything in the past that led to today. So that sounds inspirational and hopeful, but I also have to tell you the truth that sometimes I do when I see pictures of them together, right? It does hit me as, oh my God, like what happened? Why didn't this work out? What would the situation in my life be now? But it's not that. Today is what it is. So even though it was painful, I can find gratitude because I'm still here. And there's also some other questions which you can explore at your own leisure. but I just want to hone in on number 6 really quick before we continue. Did any of these challenges clear away personal barriers or internal blockages that once prevented me from embracing my full self? Absolutely. And I think when we really lean into the storms and we acknowledge the storm and we respect the storm for its ability to be a storm and to change everything, I think we have to be grateful and acknowledge the strength that, hey, you know what? If I can bury a father, if I can bury a brother, if I can survive this anxiety attack, this panic attack, this whatever, if I can keep going this, um, what is there really to be afraid of? And of course, we'll have, fear of going on a job interview or getting on an airplane or those little things. But I'm talking about life and also really trusting our inner voice. Why do we have to have fear by our sense and our understanding of the world? And so the storms, in many ways, cleared those blockages away and revealed, hey, nobody's safe. First off, no one is safe. So if no one's safe, why not just do the best that you can, with the resources that you have? And so I want you to try reauthoring the storm and turning that negative, hard experience into an experience that champions change for whoever your story represents, whoever you're shining that lighthouse for, right? How did you become the champion for the people who are still stuck out on sea? And so I want to thank you for your time, for joining me for Riding Through the Storm on Medium Day 2024. It was a great experience to connect with everyone in the session. I'm really excited by some of the responses that I got. Please check out the worksheet. So the worksheet kind of gets into more direct ways for you to write down different quotes of words that maybe you'll never forget or that you had heard, who said it and when, right? So this is a worksheet to really systematically walk through. So go ahead, download that worksheet. Let me know if you have any questions. I want to help. I will continue writing on my journey. This has really worked for me. It has opened me up to a lot of different forms of writing, and I feel excited still about who I'm becoming, and I can't wait to see how far that I can push this while also honoring the reason why I'm here. And that's because of the memory of Claude Burt Victory Jr., my late father. So thank you so much for joining me through this session, Riding Through the Storm, exploring identity, health, and creativity. I hope to hear from you soon.